of the Metropolitan Water District.
President Alvarez, if you just.
She's not ready. 1, 2, 3, go. Right. So I'd like to call to order the West Basin Metropolitan Water District Representative. Excuse me. Special meeting of the Board of Directors. With that, we have a form determination, Mr. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. President. Director Scott Houston, Director Don Deere here, Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
President Desi Alvarez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
So next up is public comment. Do we have any?
President Alvarez, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to make public comment, now would be the time to do so. Please indicate your desire and raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. And President Alvarez, I do not see any request for public comment.
Okay. Then we will go to our agenda items, and the first item is an update on conservation as a way of life regulations. And Krista Guerrero is going to be making that presentation, Mr. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. President, I do see that Krista has joined us virtually from Metropolitan Water District, and she will be leading us off with the first presentation.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me be here today. Today, I'll be discussing the final regulation as it was adopted last July on making conservation a California way of life. I will also be explaining to you some of the resources that Metropolitan has available, along with resources from the California Water Efficiency Partnership, of which we are members, that are available to you and your agencies to assist with the regulation. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the regulation as it was adopted. The regulation itself is a calculation of an urban water use objective that agencies must stay under in order to be considered in compliance. And there are several standards that are summed together in order to determine what that overall objective is for a retail water agency. Those are the indoor residential water budget, an outdoor residential water budget, CII for water budget for areas with dedicated irrigation meters, a water loss threshold, and then adjustments that can be made for variances, temporary provisions, and a bonus incentive. Agriculture and indoor CII are not part of the calculated portion of the budget, but the indoor CII does have to be covered by a best management practice requirement, which I will discuss. Next slide, please. So the indoor standard itself is calculated by multiplying the indoor standard by the population for your retail water agency service area and the number of days in the year. So these standards are locked in place and were passed by the legislature in a separate bill. So they are from 2020 to 2025. They were 55 gallons per capita per day. Now in 2025, they shift to 47 gallons per capita per day. And then in 2030, they will shift down again to 42 gallons per capita per day. So again, you are multiplying that per capita times the number of people that you service and the number of days in the year to get your overall total indoor standard. Next slide, please. So the residential outdoor standard is a function of your available rainwater, the landscape square footage that was provided by DWR in your landscape area measurement data, and the landscape efficiency factor. So a landscape efficiency factor is the idea that a specific landscape would require only a certain amount of water based on what is planted. And the idea being that as more and more areas are converted from turf grass to California-friendly landscaping, the amount of water required by a landscape is intended to go down over time. So as you can see here, from 2025 to 2035, the standard starts at 0.8. From 2035 to 2040, it drops to 0.63. And then by 2040 and beyond, you get 0.55 landscape efficiency factor as you're multiplying it by your available rainwater and the amount of landscape residential square footage that you have. For new developments, it stays at 0.55, or if MWILO, the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, changes that number, it would follow that change. And special landscape areas such as pools, And other areas would have a 1.0 landscape efficiency factor. Next slide, please. So commercial, industrial, institutional accounts are separated into two different regulations, as I mentioned. So one is a standards-based for accounts with dedicated irrigation meters, and one is performance measure-based. Properties with dedicated irrigation meters do need to have their calculated landscape area. DWR will be providing initial data for those, but since DWR is not familiar with which areas are dedicated irrigation meters and which ones are on mixed use meters, you as a water agency or your staff will need to adjust those numbers based on the information that you have on the number of irrigation only accounts. The standard for the dedicated irrigation meter starts or for 2028 to 2035 and currently is 0.8. From 2035 to 2040, it drops to 0.63, and then from 2040 on, it drops to 0.45. So you will notice that the CII landscape efficiency factor is lower than the residential. Next slide, please. There is a water loss standard. The standard for water loss for leaks in the system is a loss standard of gallons per connection per day, which is only applied to retail water loss. So you do not have to take into account any wholesale water loss at this time. Next slide. There is a bonus incentive for potable recycled water, but it depends on whether the facility is existing or if you have a planned future facility. So it is the amount of potable reuse water that's delivered from an augmented source to residential and commercial users. If it is an existing source, you are allowed to count 15%. And if it is from a future planned facility, it is 10%. Next slide. Some things that were added to the final regulation sort of in the last hour before it was adopted was that outdoor standard adjustment to 0.55 and 0.45 for residential and commercial changed from 2035 to 2040. So originally those numbers had to be met by 2035. They did give us a 5-year grace period to reach those numbers because of the understanding that it would take quite a bit of time for turf replacement and other landscape changes to occur to reach those lower standards. They also added an existing tree variance for residential and commercial outdoor standards. So for existing trees, you are able to include the water that's necessary to maintain those trees, and so that we can protect our current urban tree canopy. There are a number of items that you have to provide in order to receive that variance. So if you have questions on that, of course, please reach out to Metropolitan, or you can look at it more closely in the regulations so you understand how to get those tree variances. There's also an alternative compliance pathway for any disadvantaged community retailers that are facing a 20% or greater reduction in water use. So there is a toolkit on the DWR and State Water Resource Control Board website, which should show you an estimate of the amount of water you would need to reduce by to meet your objective. If it's 20% or more and you are a disadvantaged community, there are other ways to be considered in compliance with the regulation. And something that Metropolitan worked very hard to achieve is that we are allowed to include regional programs as qualifying performance measures and best management practices for CII standard compliance. So you as a retail water agency do not need to have all of these programs run by your own agency. Everything that Metropolitan is doing on your behalf does qualify. Next slide. So the reporting started January 1st of 2025. Hopefully each of your agencies did submit their first initial report by January of 2025. January 1st, excuse me. And the supplier has to provide their actual water use, including their dedicated landscape deliveries. That goes to the SAFER clearinghouse. The residential service area population and the number of CII service connections, which is in your electronic annual report. And then also the number of service connections, mains, and your water loss, which is part of your water loss object audit. All of that will pre-populate when you've put it in there to the objective report. But the orange and black boxes are the things that you have to provide in addition to what you've been doing in the past. So that's where you're seeing that you directly enter into the urban water use objective report, your residential special landscape area square footage, recycled water area square footage, any misclassifications between CII and residential customers, number of disclosable buildings, just quite a few things that have to be added that were not part of your previous reporting. And then, of course, if you have any variances or temporary provisions, that has to be added in as well. There is an understanding that this first report was not going to be complete because the actual objective was not, or excuse me, the actual regulation was not approved until July 3rd of last year. And so that didn't quite give people enough time to get all of this information. State Water Resource Control Board simply asked that you filled out as much of it as possible. Next slide. So this is the timeline for the regulation itself. As you can see, it was adopted in July of last year. The annual reports were due on January 1st. And starting in July of this year, you to start categorizing and proving that you've categorized your CIIs and provided your best management practices to your top 2.5% and top 20% of your overall users. Again, this is a lot of detail. If you have additional questions, please reach out to probably your conservation staff and also Metropolitan. We're here to help as well. Some other key dates that I just want to note quickly. You do need to implement any of your implementation of your CII dedicated irrigation meter standard by July of 2028. And you want to make sure that you are categorizing your CII accounts based on the regulation. Next slide. So how is Metropolitan supporting this effort? We are providing compliance support through many of our programs. Of course, the member agency administered program is a key one where you can do any localized, projects that you need to complete. In addition to our public agency funding bucket, which provides additional funding for that, and I'll speak about that in a minute. Our regional rebate programs certainly qualify as a best management practice for CII, as does our water savings incentive program. We have a number of outreach and marketing materials to assist you with providing this information to your customers. Our large landscape survey program, again, is another one that qualifies as a CII best management practice, as does our professional class series. In addition, we have a turf dashboard that will allow you to target and find your larger CII users so that you can assist with any of their performance measures or dedicated irrigation meter needs. Next slide. This is a snapshot of a spreadsheet that was sent to the conservation staff at each of your water agencies that lists out for the different BMP options that are available to you from the State Water Resource Control Board, which Metropolitan programs qualify. So again, instead of you having to create your own programs, as you're doing the reporting, you can simply select each of these programs and tell State Board that your customers have these programs available to them, and therefore you have met that part of the regulation. If you have questions, or if your staff has not seen this spreadsheet or didn't receive it, it was sent to Gus Meza at West Basin. So please feel free to reach out to him or to me to get a copy. Next slide. So the member agency administered program that Metropolitan funds is a 2-year allocation to member agencies to administer any local programs that they'd like within different categories. So we have device-based projects as one category, customized with documented water savings projects, customized with non-documented water savings projects, or what we call flex spending, disadvantaged community projects, and then the one that's most relevant here is our public agency project bucket. Next slide. So this bucket has 3 options within it. One is for public agency facility improvements, one is for drought response marketing, and the one most relevant to the regulation is what we call regulatory compliance. Essentially, it is funding available to you to assist in support of the regulation. So if you need to hire a consultant to do your CII categorization, or to measure your dedicated irrigation meters, or if you want to purchase aerial imagery, or anything that along those lines that assist you with compliance with the regulation, you would be able to use the funding in this member agency bucket in order to do so. Next slide. As I mentioned, Metropolitan and our member agencies and retailers are members of the California Water Efficiency Partnership, or CalWEP, and they have a number of available resources that would also be very useful to you and your agencies in regards to compliance with the framework. So right now they have cut sheets that explain each standard in detail. I've given you a very high overview, but if you want more detail, they're a great place to start, including a Framework 101 slide deck, the crosswalk for your CII account categorization, so you can find the right categories for each of your accounts, a disclosable buildings toolkit, RFP guidance if you're going to be hiring a consultant to assist, a CII dedicated irrigation meter identification guidebook, and some data contacts. Next slide. So the guidebooks provide practical methodologies to integrate the CIA data with your customer data and give you 3 different approaches, again, making it very simple for you to follow. It helps you determine the landscape areas for your DIMS and to distinguish and measure your mixed use meter areas as well. Next slide. In November of 2024, they also added the practical guide to classifying those water users. As I said, that needs to be done. And so they are case studies and lesson learned and the best methodologies and resources to classify your CII accounts. Next slide. So still to come, we have the qualified vendors list that will, again, contractors and consultants that can show you how to, that can assist you with the regulation, the alternative data sources, a funding brief, and then there is a new water view land viewer that's going to be coming into effect that will show you all of your data and all the different categories for your landscape area measurements. Next slide. And that's what I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have additional needs or concerns.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. Board members, do we have any questions? Director Houston.
I don't have any questions right now.
Director Gray, do you have any?
No, thank you. Thank you.
All right, Director Deere. If we can go to slide 8 and just expand a little bit more on the alternative compliance pathway for DAC retailers.
Absolutely. So as I said, if you are a disadvantaged community retailer and there is a standard that has to be applied, it's based on the median household income for your customers. And you are facing a 20% or greater reduction in water use. So if your objective is 20% or more of a reduction from what you are currently using, instead of meeting all of these BMP requirements and the actual standard amounts for the indoor and the outdoor use and all those calculations that I talked about, you simply need to be able to have a plan to eventually meet the objective in that way, but have a reduction of 1 to 2% per year. So you need to be showing that overall effort that you are reducing water without having to make that 20% jump in the first year or anything like that. As long as you have that gradual reduction, you would be considered in compliance with the regulation.
So it's more of a percentage based, not a absolute number.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. The other question, I don't know if that's for you or for our staff, is on the CII program, do we have an idea in terms of the commercial amount of potential acreage and savings that may generate?
Acreage, like acre feet of water demand, or are you talking about grass?
Talking about acreage and grass areas that we can target. And
We have done analysis on our large landscapes, especially within the West Basin service area. As far as our CII, have we done an in-depth analysis?
CAI has not been completed yet. We are in talks with Eagle Aerial, who's done a lot of landscape area measurement throughout the state to see if we could work with them to get a better figure for our service area. So that's something that we're going to be looking at in 2025 to provide to our retailers as an option. But we don't have that calculation as of yet. The state provided the residential landscape area measurements, but it hasn't done the CII yet.
And if I could add, so the turf dashboard that Metropolitan currently has available, West Basin does have, and each of your retailers does have its own login to that dashboard. It does calculate turf areas based on land use category. So it is at least an initial estimate that you could use for that information.
Does Met have an estimate then for the greater Met area? If it
Of the
aggregates
total
all
amount
those-
of turf that we have?
Mhm.
We do, yes. So currently, based on our calculations, for non-functional turf, we're looking at just close to 750 million square feet.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Let me ask.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Director Houston. And just in thinking about this, I mean, it's really complicated. I don't even have my head around it yet, but how is Metropolitan and then the local agencies, how are you all going to educate the public on this?
So as Metropolitan as a wholesaler does not have to comply with the regulation, it is a retail regulation, retail water agency regulation. We are providing as much support as we can. We do have information that we can provide to you to provide to your customers to assist with that. Again, that California Water Efficiency Partnership is the best resources currently for that as well. But we, as an entity ourselves, will not be providing information to consumers because we do not want to step on any messages that you may be conveying to your own customers.
Okay.
And Director Houston, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
Under that, we're very happy to have Krista Guerrero here because she's able to put this in the context of Metropolitan Water District, as well as the programs that they offer for our retailers to get into compliance. I really want to stress the point that West Basin staff has been working with each of our individual retailers on this issue for the past several years since the legislation was enacted. It's been a part of all of our discussions related to our water use efficiency quarterly meetings that we have with all of our retailers. And then, of course, our individual discussions. And when you talk about educating the public, obviously West Basin has been promoting water use efficiency for years and years and years. But it's important to note that we don't want to cause any confusion. Each of our individual retailers will be looking at their collective water use efficiency targets and determining their approach to actually meeting that. Our number one objective is to make sure that all of our retailers are in compliance with their water use efficiency objectives and goals, targets. And so individual plans will ultimately be needed to be made because all of our retailers will have a different approach as far as meeting those targets.
Great. That helps me a lot, and thank you, because we have multiple retailers, obviously. And so if anything else, we need to direct people in our divisions or districts to their local retailer to get the firm answers to those type of questions, it sounds like.
Mhm.
Correct. Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and we will move on. The next item is the water supply update and Mr. General Manager.
Yes, President Alvarez, there's probably no better time right now to just recognize what's going on here in Los Angeles County with multiple fires impacting not only the West Basin service area, but several other Metropolitan Water District agencies, as well as residents and businesses throughout the area. Our expected speaker, Ms. Nusha Razavian, is actually one of those impacted. She, I believe, has been ordered to evacuate. And so we're sorry that we're not going to have her here to present, but we hope that she's okay, her and her family. We did want to provide just a brief overview of the water supply update. We sent out emails last week to all the board of directors because of the recent check on California snowpack. And so we felt that this was a timely update. And so we do have our manager of water policy and resources development, Matt Vay, here to provide the information that's been provided by Matt. We'll try to do our best to review it and go through that with you. But we would obviously point out that Nusha is an expert in this field. And so we're going to do our best. So Matt, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay, thank
Sure will be a very good.
thank you for the vote of confidence. Why don't we go ahead and move to slide 3? Okay, great. So just to kind of realign everyone, we had the drought of 2018 to 2022, December of 2022, when we started seeing some of those atmospheric rivers come through, drop record, amounts of snow and rain throughout the state. So the last couple of years, we've seen above average to well above average in both of our snowpack and our precipitation. And as a result of that, Metropolitan's been able to build up its water storage supplies. I know Tammy does a great job each month of providing kind of a water supply update on behalf of Metropolitan. But just to go into some of these slides, and we find ourselves right now, we're in the 4th month now of the water year, which runs from October to September. So we're firmly in kind of the wet months now, usually. But if you take a look at this map here, what you'll see from our watershed, you'll see that things are looking pretty good in the Northern California and our Sierra Nevadas and Central California. It's this southern part of the state that's been drier, which I think we all can understand is probably lended itself to the fires that we're seeing right now. But as you kind of work up the state, we've seen more rainfall and snowpack this year. And then in our Colorado River watershed, we've seen the last couple of years above average snowpack there, which is good, which has allowed Lake Mead to maintain higher levels in the reservoir there than they would otherwise. And I think we'll get into this in some of the other slides, but the Colorado River watershed continues to be average or above average for snowpack so far this year. So we can move to the next slide. Okay, so this is just one of several indexes that the state uses to kind of assess it's the health of the water supply. This is the Northern Sierra 8 station index. So far this year, this is above average, about 136% of average. Again, if you looked at Central California and Southern California, they wouldn't be quite so high here. So if you look at it from a statewide perspective, in terms of precip, you're looking more at about average statewide level there, but a good start to the year so far. Next slide. And then same thing with the snowpack, again, 162% of normal as of the beginning of this year. So a very good picture in our northern Sierras. I think as EJ mentioned, they had their first snow survey in the last couple of weeks. And in that, they determined that we are above average. The state, they like to go up to the mountains and put a stick in the ground to see, what the snowpack is. But they have sensors throughout the state that tracks this stuff on a daily basis. And so far, Northern Sierra is looking good. And again, as you move down the state into Central and Southern California, that's where we've seen less snowpack so far this year. Big Bear, for instance, is still in pretty dry conditions so far. Move to the next slide. And then looking at our reservoirs, and there's a couple different, I think, graphs that we'll be seeing here. This is for Lake Oroville. So if you notice that at this time last year, we were about 400,000 or 500,000 feet lower. So we're starting the year higher. Lake Oroville definitely has built up over the past year. And you'll see, the reservoir levels build up as we come into the summer months. And then in the summer months, they start using some of those reserves and it drops into the fall and the winter months. But I know that we're well above the historical average for capacity for Lake Oroville right now. We're not hitting that peak of 3.4 million acre feet, but it's in a very good position right now. Next slide. And this is a slide that Metropolitan threw in. And I think over the last couple of years, they've been looking at the lake just to kind of assess it. And it looks like due to, just natural buildup of sedimentation over the years that they have noticed there's been a reduction in the capacity of the reservoir there. So I think they've reduced the total capacity that they publish now. Not any huge impacts to state water project contractors. I think minimal you can see there. And just remember that Metropolitan is only half of the total state water project allocation. So the impacts to them are even less than I think you would see here. But you can see that because of those changes over time, we're getting about 20,000 acre feet less deliveries per year. And those would only be happening in those, drought or dry or below normal years, not happening in a year like this year where it's been normal or above normal. Next slide. And then this is the San Luis Reservoir, which again, it shares both federal and state project water supplies. Again, if you look at the left side of that graph there, you can see that it's the current year starting about 500,000 acre feet higher than we did last year. But they did hit their target by the end of the year last year, which is good. So again, well above their normal average at San Luis Reservoir. I think you could see the same thing at Lake Shasta, which isn't shown here, but all the reservoirs seem to be in pretty good shape right now. Next slide. And then this again is just looking at the snowpack in the upper part of the Colorado River Basin. Pretty close to 100% of normal. I think last year and the year before that, we're looking at about 120 to 150% of average, if my memory serves me right. So again, started out the year pretty good. It could go one of two ways. It could continue to increase, could stay at normal. We're hoping it'll stay at normal. It's allowed us to move from a less severe shortage on the Colorado River. The last year, you might remember that Arizona and Nevada are currently experiencing cuts, but California hasn't been involved yet. But if Lake Mead continues to drop, then we could get cuts in the future. But I think for now, we're at a place where that's not expected to happen for at least a couple of years. So maintaining that average or above average snowpack is critical to maintaining the reservoir level on Lake Mead as well. Next slide. I think there's just one slide on the wisdom, the water surplus and drought management plan. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, I guess first we're going to just talk about the state water project update. It's tracking very similar to last year when we started out at a 5% allocation on the state water project. It was increased to 15% last year, and then we actually ended the year last year at about, I believe, at 40%. This year's tracking again very, very closely to that. It was 5% initially. They just increased that to 15% in the last week or two, based on some of those, snowpack conditions, the precip that we've seen so far. It's something that they review basically every month through April or May. So I think we'll continue to see that hopefully increase this year, assuming that there's additional storms that come through California during that time. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll look at how that actually impacts Metropolitan's supply demand balance. Can you just click through? I think there's some additional data that needs to pop up. So you see here that the current supply estimate, sorry about that, if you go back one, is about 1.25 million acre feet between Colorado River and the State Water Project. As you can see in the line above that, they're showing demand of about 1.5 million acre feet. So that gap there is about 250,000 acre feet. I think we know that the demand is actually probably lower than that, lower than the 1.5. And so there's probably actually not that big of a gap in reality. But with each, percentage more, they go up in 5% increments with state water project allocations. That'll decrease that expected gap there. So again, if we can get up to where we're at a 30 to 40% allocation on the state water project, we should be, again, in a place where we can continue to see that record amount of storage in that system kind of be sustained at least for the next year. Is there anything that you want to add to that, EJ? Okay, I think that is the last slide of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? We'll start with you, Director Houston. Sure.
I think the only question I have at this moment is the status or condition for Lake Oroville, because obviously we had the spillway problem a few years back, but it is one of our only earthen dams in the state of California or United States, or give or take. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But on the other hand, I remember there was a lot of discussion of, it has a lot of issues, challenges. So, but I've not heard anyone talking about that in recent years. Does anybody know where the state is with Oroville's condition?
I know, yeah, they fixed the main spillway at that time. Obviously, they put in how many millions of pounds of new concrete there. I believe they also addressed the backup emergency spillway at that time as well, which also failed in that initial incident several years ago. So from what I understand, Lake Oroville is in a much more reliable state than it was at that time, both main spillway and the backup. But that's my knowledge on it.
But is there anything else? Because it's not exact. It's getting older.
Well, all California's infrastructure is getting older, but as Matt mentioned, the repairs we've not heard or seen any real concerns with that. As planned, they started releasing water in preparation for the snowpack and precipitation. So water's been moving through there, I think, as planned. And so we'll look to see if there are any issues that we're not aware of. We can work with Metropolitan Water District staff, of course, but we don't have anything to report at this time.
I don't know, Mr. President, you have anything more than I have, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Because there was a lot of discussion that dam, has a potential for failure, which is really scary. So what I would just ask would be, can you check and just to find out, because it's not been top of mind or radar for anybody that I'm hearing, and I just would like to hear down the road. You could even just probably email it to us. What's it going on? How's it looking? That's extremely scary when you think about it. So that's all, Mr. President. Thank you.
I'm pleased that they're working out, they have been working on the dam. It's really terrifying when you think about what could happen if there was a failure of that dam. It'd be horrible. Things are looking up finally.
Director Gray, do you have any questions or comments? I don't have any other comments, so thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on. Any general director comments that anybody would like to okay, Mr. General Manager, do you have anything to add?
None at this time. We do have a special board meeting beginning at 1:30. So we have some comments at that point.
All right, so we'll be adjourning this meeting until next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only concern.